Welcome. Today, we're going to be going over one of the most depraved and wicked cases that ever happened in Hong Kong. We're going to be talking about the Hello Kitty case. The victim in this case was Fan Man-yi. It would happen on March 17th, 1999, and last until approximately April 15th, 1999. Warning, the case about to be mentioned may be too gruesome for some members of the audience. Background: Fan Man-yi's tragic tale begins in 1975. Her exact birth date is unknown, but the tragedy starts when she was first abandoned as a child by her parents. This would eventually result in her bouncing around several orphanages. At the age of 15, she would be kicked out of the all-girls orphanage that had taken her in. They cited an age restriction. She would then go on to be homeless, addicted to drugs, and living quite the rough life. Fan's life would continue to change. She would be sold into the red light district and forced into prostitution. She began working at the age of 21 in a brothel. This is where she would meet her husband. In 1998, she would give birth to her first son. Her husband was described as a very abusive and drug addict as well. Some neighbors would report loud violence, constant crying, and screaming from the child and the family alike. Also, as a side note, the information about her son is little and none. I do believe that he survived, but for the sake of his well-being, I will not release his name. So, when Fan would give birth to her son, she would decide to turn her life around in order to protect her son and provide for him the life she never had, and a safer one. She quit drugs and attempted at getting clean. She would again get a job at a brothel, but this time as a hostess, eventually leaving her vicious husband behind a few months later. This was a large undertaking for her, but for her son, many said she could do anything. Chan Man-lok was a 34-year-old triad member, one of the regulars at the brothel that Fan had worked at. They seemed to know each other and had some close relation with each other, as Chan was a drug dealer that Fan had often bought from, and would eventually be seen multiple times hanging out around Chan and his henchmen. In the early 1999, a defining moment would happen that would change their relationship. Fan, in a moment of desperation, now again addicted to drugs, in a desperation for them and money to live, Fan stole Chan's wallet, one that had approximately 4,000 Hong Kong dollars, or approximately 500 USD at the time. Chan, taking advantage of the position of power that he was in, would threaten Fan and threaten her to return the 4,000 plus another 10,000 Hong Kong dollars in a move to blackmail her. Returning the money, she said she would need some additional time for the fee. Chan was not very receptive to this, and before any of that could happen, on March 17th, 1999, Fan was abducted by Chan and two of his henchmen. She was initially to be sold into prostitution, and he was going to take all the money that she had made from it. But things quickly turned sour. Days leading up to the murder, she was abducted by 3 men, 1 girl. Chan, Lung Wai, 21, Lung Xin, 21, and Ah Feng, 14. Ah Feng, the 14-year-old girl that was involved in the kidnappings, was known as only Ah Feng, which is likely a pseudonym given to her by the Hong Kong courts. The 14-year-old girl was Chan's girlfriend, though girlfriend is probably more of a loose term, and in all likelihood, the girl was likely another one of his prostitutes. So, even a victim herself in a loose sense, but don't get this wrong, she was no less wicked and twisted than as the other 3 triad members, if not worse. At one point, when Ah Feng was visiting the torturous trio in Man Mok's apartment, she witnessed him kick Man Yi 50 times in the head. Ah Feng then joined in hitting her in the head, though the details to the extent of the torture inflicted by Ah Feng was not released as part of her plea deal. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that it is excessive, and when she was asked about her crimes, she replied, "I only did it because I had a feeling it was for fun." That is just a mere glimpse into the twisted mind of Ah Feng. The other two men were henchmen of Chan's. All three of the men were members of the local triad, mainly participating in selling drugs, running a local red light district, and each of them were longtime criminals with extensive histories. The trio were not strangers to violent and illegal activities, but this time, it went way too far. The group took Fan to an apartment at number 30th Granville Road, where they would imprison her for a month. Her stay at this apartment on Granville Road was horrid, one of the scariest things that any person could imagine. During her imprisonment, she was tortured, raped, by what Ah Feng said must have been 10 to 200 times. She was beaten with metal bars, kitchen utensils, furniture pieces, sometimes even strung up and used as a punching bag. It was so bad, she had even gotten her head kicked over 50 times on just one occasion. The monsters would then rub spices and salts into her wounds. They would go to extreme lengths to make sure she couldn't escape or even walk at all. Throughout all of this, she was forced to keep a very big smile and say that she enjoyed the beatings, and say that she was happy. If she'd said anything to the contrary, things could get worse. Much worse. These constant beatings would eventually lead her to death. Not even the date can be confirmed, just a time range. All that is known is that after her death, the four would dismember her body, boil the remaining parts. It is unclear what they did with a majority of the remains. The only body parts that were discovered was a skull, a single tooth, and a few internal organs, preserved in plastic bags, all horrifyingly hidden in a Hello Kitty doll. These body parts to the sick and twisted crew were all fun memorabilia they had. There are some that suspect that the trio may have had a hand in consuming the body to get rid of it, but none of that has been specified. However, the theory is extremely present as they admitted to boiling most of her body. And the disposal of her body, nor any of her body parts other than the ones listed above, were ever found. Ah Feng was one who would report everything to the police, and eventually the first to lead them to the scene. Sentencing. The trial would last over 6 weeks. The men were unfortunately not convicted of murder, but of manslaughter. Ah Feng was a key witness in the trial, in exchange for complete immunity, which is seen as many as unfortunate because she was equally complicit and equally psychotic as the three. The trio would be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, which, given from Justice Peter Nguyen, who said, "Never in Hong Kong's recent history has a court ever heard of such cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness." Multiple psychiatric reports and analyses of the trio showed that all of the three had neither regret nor guilt, mostly described as remorseless. The parole period was 20 years, and it ended in 2020. One of the murderers was out on parole, now back in prison after sexually assaulting a friend's daughter, and should be out now. I would consider this one of the most saddening murders that I've ever heard of. Not only because of the way she died, but the extended pain through her disappearance. No one lifted a finger in finding her. She just disappeared. No one noticed. Her spot in society filled the instant she left. I do believe her son is alive, and if he is, I wish him a good life. And I wish him all my support, because even this many years later, it can't be any easier. And to his mother, rest in peace. She may be dead, but not forgotten. In this case, I do hope that it brings a higher awareness to everything around you. If you see something weird, please say something. And with that said, I hope you have a good day and keep your eyes open. Bye.